The heels of her designer shoes clicked past my desk at exactly 8:15 a.m., the precision of a high-end Swiss clock. It was the same rhythm, the same sound of expensive, hard leather on polished concrete, that marked the start of every business day. I kept my head down. I never allowed myself to look up. To look up, even for a split second, was to invite a flicker of hope that she might notice me or acknowledge me or maybe even speak my name. And I had learned years ago that hope was a luxury, financially and emotionally, that I simply could not afford. My name is Paul Morrison, and I am an executive assistant stationed on the 28th floor of a monolithic structure in downtown Seattle, a glass sentinel reflecting the cold Pacific light. From my vantage point, the Puget Sound looked less like water and more like a blade of light slicing through the urban sprawl. Most people, if they saw me at all, saw a useful fixture. Someone quiet, utterly dependable, and functionally forgettable, who ensured things got done without generating friction. My boss, Maya Hayes, built this technology consulting empire from a concept scribbled on a napkin. She is defined by control, sharp, ruthlessly focused, and possessed of a success that instills profound nervousness in others. When she enters a room, the entire atmosphere shifts. Voices drop to reverent undertones, spines instinctively straighten, and mobile phones vanish faster than evidence at a crime scene. She wears suits tailored with architectural severity, and her expression is a masterful, smooth slate, offering no purchase. Every day, she sweeps past my station as if I were merely an element of the floor plan. I might as well be a minimalist lamp or a particularly dusty potted ficus. It makes no difference to her. But I notice things about her, the minuscule failures in her perfect architecture. She takes her coffee with a solitary, tiny measure of cream, never sugar, a preference for bitterness. When a high-stakes meeting turns sour, she taps the barrel of her pen precisely 3 times against her palm before issuing a final, cutting directive. And she remains in her office long after the rest of the floor has dissolved into the evening commute, the solitary glow of her monitor screen the only light left burning against the approaching dark. I catalog these observations not out of curiosity, but because it is my function, my silent, unwritten duty, to anticipate every possible variable. Expecting anything beyond that is a fatal risk. My father resides in a nursing facility across town. He suffered a debilitating stroke 2 years ago, the kind that systematically steals words and mobility. Insurance contributes a portion, but the gap is a chasm I struggle daily to bridge. The invoices arrive in thick, heavy white envelopes that I handle with the slow, surgical precision of someone attempting to defuse an unstable explosive. Rent is due without fail on the 1st of every month, and my landlord operates without mercy or sentimentality. This job is not a career dream. It is the entire integrity of my lifeline. I cannot afford to jeopardize it over something as fundamentally stupid as wanting to be acknowledged. Therefore, I labor in silence. I preemptively correct errors before they ever materialize into problems. I stay until the cleaning crew arrives when a project requires closure. I keep my profile low and my opinions unvoiced. The unwritten rule of this corporate ecosystem is simple. People who successfully blend into the walls do not get fired. This morning commenced according to the established script. I placed my worn messenger bag beside my chair and initiated the computer. As the screen blinked to life, I pulled up Maya's comprehensive daily schedule. Board meeting at 10 a.m. Lunch with major prospective clients at noon. A crucial conference call with the New York headquarters at 4 p.m. I was cross-referencing notes on the projected Q3 figures when the elevator doors hissed open behind me. Footsteps, steady and authoritative, approached. Maya strode past, her phone already clamped to her ear, discussing financial metrics that easily eclipsed my entire annual salary. She did not slacken her pace. She did not spare me a passing glance. Naturally, I never expected her to. Then I saw them. Flowers. A massive, ostentatious bouquet of pristine white and pale pink hybrid roses, situated squarely on the corner of my otherwise unremarkable desk. The arrangement was composed with professional artistry, the kind that carries a triple-digit price tag. They were fresh, aggressively expensive, and utterly, scandalously inappropriate for my small, utilitarian corner of the 28th floor. My heart rate immediately accelerated, but it wasn't excitement. It was a pure, cold surge of confusion and alarm. Flowers, this level of extravagant beauty, did not belong in my life, not here, not ever. Tucked discreetly among the sturdy stems was a small, cream-colored envelope. My name, Paul Morrison, was inscribed on the front in an elegant, clean cursive. Before I could extend my hand to reach for it, the atmosphere surrounding us solidified. I felt the change first, an abrupt vacuum of motion before I registered the cause. Maya had stopped walking. For the first time since I had been employed here, my boss executed a complete turn. Her gaze focused directly on my desk, specifically on the unauthorized flowers. Her eyes narrowed and locked onto the bouquet, assessing it like an unforeseen operational failure she was attempting to solve in real time. And then, for the briefest, most terrifying fraction of a second, I saw it. Something dark, a flicker of an emotion that looked dangerously close to fury, moved across her perfectly composed features. I froze. My hand hovered paralyzed in the air, halfway to retrieving the envelope. All around me, the monotonous clicking of keyboards continued, the hum of printers vibrated, and people continued working, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring in the foreground. But I felt horrifyingly exposed, as if someone had activated a brilliant, searing spotlight and aimed it directly at my face. Maya remained motionless for perhaps 1 second longer than human convention dictated. She then performed a minute adjustment to the collar of her bespoke jacket, and the dark expression instantly vanished, replaced by the familiar, smooth mask of absolute control. She turned away fluidly and entered her private office. The massive, insulated glass door clicked shut softly behind her, reflecting only the vast, indifferent city beyond. Only then did I finally release the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were shaking faintly. I reached for the envelope with agonizing slowness, keeping the gesture low beneath the edge of my desk where it would be obscured from casual view. I slid the card out. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. That was the entirety of the message. No name, no signature, just those words written in neat, indelible black ink. I stared at the typeface until the letters began to blur into an incomprehensible smudge. A tight, physical sensation pressed against my chest, a feeling I couldn't readily categorize. It sat somewhere uncomfortable between genuine gratitude and paralyzing fear. Whoever sent these flowers knew me. Not Paul Morrison, executive assistant, but the actual, hidden person who sat diligently at this desk every day. They had perceived something within me that I believed I had successfully buried from the world. I snapped the card closed and shoved it deep into my desk drawer. Then I resumed staring intently at my computer screen, adopting the posture of profound concentration, as if nothing whatsoever had transpired. This is the only mechanism for survival in a place like this. You do not entertain questions that could potentially destroy your financial stability. You do not generate waves. You most certainly do not attract attention to yourself over an unsolicited, expensive floral arrangement. I had learned that foundational lesson the hardest possible way, back when my father first fell ill and I was forced to abandon the university education I had fought so desperately to attain. Dreams instantly metamorphosed into grim deadlines. Passion became a commodity I could no longer afford to possess. The flowers followed me relentlessly throughout the entire morning. I was acutely aware of the minute glances people cast toward my corner as they passed. I registered the faint, unfamiliar whispers, not malicious, perhaps, but undeniably curious. Yet curiosity in an office predicated solely on the distribution of power and resources is a highly dangerous contagion. I attempted to focus on my tasks with even greater rigor than usual. At exactly 10 o'clock, I delivered the board packets into the conference room, ensuring every folder was aligned with millimeter precision. At 11 o'clock, I smoothly rescued a forgotten but crucial rescheduled call, deploying the same measured, calm voice I always use to neutralize chaos. At noon, I skipped my planned break and answered outstanding emails, while the rest of the floor went out together for expensive lunches. No one ever asked me to join. No one asked about the flowers, either. They didn't need to. The simple presence of the roses on my desk had already irrevocably shifted the dynamic. Inside her fortress of glass, Maya stood by the vast window. I could perceive her silhouette, phone held loosely, staring out at the expansive cityscape. She remained immobile for a significant duration. I permitted myself a momentary lapse, wondering what precise thought was occupying her mind. I wondered if she was thinking of me at all. Then I ruthlessly suppressed the thought because wondering was merely another word for hoping, and I had already settled the cost analysis. Hope was far too expensive. I did not touch the roses for the remainder of the day. They maintained their impossible, aggressive beauty on the desk corner, representing a bright, impossible question mark I had no mechanism to answer. With every passing colleague, I could feel their eyes zeroing in on the blossoms first, then flicking swiftly and curiously over to me. I despised it. I had painstakingly constructed an existence where I was utterly invisible, and these flowers had demolished that architecture in a single morning. I defaulted to survival mode. I made myself physically smaller. I began answering my phone not at my desk, but retreating to the rarely used conference room down the hall. I avoided all opportunities for eye contact. I ate a small sandwich at my station with my head bent low, feigning an unsustainable level of absorption in my work, hoping to dissuade any human interaction. It almost worked. Almost. Around 3 p.m., my computer chimed, announcing an incoming instant message. It was from Maya. Paul, my office. 5 minutes. That was the total extent of the communication. No pleasantry, no context, just the impersonal force of a command. My stomach plummeted to my shoes. I reread the message 3 times, frantically auditing my performance. Had I missed a critical deadline? Failed to transmit an urgent email? Was there a single formatting error in the board packets? I ran a full mental review of my day, every task, every detail, every conversation. Nothing stood out. Everything had been executed with professional perfection. So why did I feel with such absolute certainty that I was about to be dismissed? I stood up slowly, grabbing my professional notebook, even though I knew I wouldn't need it, and started the walk toward her office. The short distance felt immeasurably longer than usual. People glanced up as I passed, and I could feel the collective weight of their attention pressing against my shoulders. When I reached her imposing glass door, I executed 2 soft, professional knocks. "Come in," she instructed from within. Her voice was level, perfectly controlled. This provided zero comfort. I stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. Maya was seated at her large desk, her hands folded symmetrically before her, observing me with an expression that remained completely opaque. For several suspended seconds, she said nothing at all. She simply looked at me, truly looked at me, not past me, not through me, but at me. It made the skin on my face feel taut and uncomfortable. "Are the flowers distracting you from your primary duties?" she asked finally. Her voice was unnervingly calm, as if she were inquiring about the office thermostat, yet there was a subterranean sharpness embedded in the delivery. I blinked, momentarily wrong-footed by the directness of the attack. "No," I responded immediately. "They do not affect my performance." I focused fiercely on keeping my voice steady and professional. I would not allow her any possible grounds to suggest I could not handle the pressure of my role. She scrutinized my face for another extended moment. I held her gaze, forcing myself not to look away first. "Good," she stated, "because expectations inevitably shift when people begin paying attention to you. Elements that were immaterial before suddenly become very important." I wasn't prepared with a protocol response for that kind of philosophical observation, so I simply offered a measured nod. "I understand." She seemed to accept the response but did not release me. Instead, she leaned back slightly in her executive chair, continuing to watch me with those calculating, laser-focused eyes. "You have been highly effective this week," she continued, pivoting abruptly. "Better than effective, actually. I am assigning you to work directly with me for the duration of the next quarter. Increased responsibility. Direct reporting. My breath hitched, momentarily trapped in my throat. That was a promotion, a substantive one. The kind that carried a significantly higher salary and an official title that actually held corporate weight. "Are you certain?" I heard myself ask before I could intercede. Immediately, I silently chastised myself for the weakness. Never question unexpected good fortune. That was another rule I had carelessly forgotten. "Yes, Paul," Maya said simply. "I am certain." She stood and walked around the expansive desk, stopping a few feet away from me, eliminating the protective barrier of the furniture. "You will commence tomorrow. I want you present in the 10 a.m. strategy meeting with the senior leadership team. Bring your detailed notes on the Catalyst project." I managed another rapid nod, my heart now hammering with anxious energy. "Thank you," I articulated. "I will not let you down." "I know," she replied. She then moved deliberately to the door and opened it, the universal, undeniable signal that the audience was terminated. I walked out of her office feeling as though the structural integrity of the floor had been compromised beneath my feet. Back at my desk, I attempted to re-engage with my work, but my mind was cycling uncontrollably. Promotion. Direct reporting to Maya Hayes. This was the exact kind of professional opportunity people dedicated years to attain. So why did the reality feel less like a reward and more like something else entirely? Like I was being pulled into her orbit for a reason I had not yet begun to comprehend. I glanced involuntarily at the flowers. They remained there, perfect, utterly alien, and completely out of place, just as I felt now. That evening, the vast majority of the office had already evacuated. The floor was muted, punctuated only by the low hum of electronics and the remote sound of the elevator car. I was meticulously packing my bag when I detected footsteps approaching behind me. I turned around. Maya stood there, her tailored jacket draped casually over one arm. Her expression, surprisingly, was softer, less fortified than I had witnessed all day. "It's going to be cold tonight," she observed. "You should take this." She held the jacket out toward me. I stared at the garment, utterly bewildered by the gesture. "I have a coat," I managed to say. "Take it anyway," she insisted. This time, her voice carried no command, only an odd, quiet offering. So I took it. The fine wool fabric was still warm, and it carried a faint, luxurious trace of her perfume, a sharp, green scent. "Thank you," I said quietly, gripping the unfamiliar weight of the garment. She nodded once, a brief acknowledgement, then walked past me toward the elevator bank. I remained standing there, holding her jacket, watching her departure and trying to reconcile what had just transpired. When I arrived home that night, I carefully hung her jacket on the back of my cheapest kitchen chair. I retrieved the card from the first bouquet out of my pocket and read the words again. Asterisk, thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Someone had seen me, truly seen the individual behind the function. And now Maya was also looking at me, but her attention felt fundamentally different, sharper, far more intense, as if she were confronting a complex problem that I somehow represented. I had no metric to determine which state was more perilous, the safety of total invisibility, or the high-stakes danger of being seen by both a secret admirer and my hyper-controlling boss. When I walked in the next morning, another bouquet was waiting. My stomach lurched violently. This one was smaller than the day before, composed of soft purple blossoms intermixed with delicate white ones. But the core message was unchanged. Someone was watching. Someone remembered my existence. I slid the envelope directly into my desk drawer without opening it, but my hands trembled slightly as I did so. Around me, keyboards clicked and phone lines buzzed with business. Yet I could feel every single pair of eyes that momentarily landed on my corner. People who had genuinely never registered my presence before were now aware of my name. They offered small smiles as they passed. They asked how my non-existent weekend had been. I hated it. Attention had never, in my life, resulted in anything positive. I could sense her surveillance from behind the glass wall. Maya stood at her window, holding her phone, but she wasn't scrolling or reading the screen. She was looking at me. When our eyes intersected for a split second, she whipped her head away instantly, but not quickly enough to hide the brief flash I caught in her expression. Anger or something unnervingly adjacent to it. My chest tightened again. I had successfully worked here for over a year without producing friction, and now 2 bouquets of flowers were systematically dismantling the carefully constructed edifice of my survival. By mid-morning, she summoned me into the promised strategy meeting. The large conference room quickly filled with senior leaders, individuals whose accumulated yearly salaries could cover my rent for a decade. I took my assigned seat at the far end of the immense, reflective mahogany table, notebook in hand, attempting desperately to dissolve into the anonymity of the leather chair. But Maya did not permit me to fade. She directed questions at me, precise, incisive questions concerning granular client accounts and the intricate details of the Catalyst project. Her voice remained calm, professional, yet her eyes were probing and sharp. When I provided the necessary, accurate answers, she would nod slowly, deliberately, as if she were testing my limits, or perhaps proving something crucial to the assembled room, or maybe even to herself. After the meeting concluded and the senior executives dispersed, she stopped me at the doorway. Her hand briefly made contact with my forearm, a feather-light touch, and I stiffened instantly. "I need to speak with you," she stated quietly. "Stay after work today." It was not framed as a request. It was an immutable order. I nodded because there was no alternative. She was my employer. She dictated whether I could meet the utility bills for the coming month. The rest of the day moved with agonizing slowness. I attempted to immerse myself in calls and emails, but my focus kept spiraling back to that brief physical contact, to the specific tone of her command. What was the subject of the meeting? Had I made an error? Were the flowers officially registered as a problem? I finally opened the second card during my solitary, desk-bound lunch. The handwriting matched the first. Asterisk, "You should never doubt your worth." I read it twice, then a third time. The words felt like a compassionate hand reaching through the darkness to grasp mine. But they also felt intensely dangerous, like they might pull me toward a consequence from which I could never retreat. By the time the office began its evening emptying ritual, my nerves were wound so taut I struggled to draw a smooth breath. I reorganized my desk a third time, stalling the inevitable confrontation. Finally, when the floor was almost deserted, I walked toward her office. The door was open. She was seated behind the desk, jacket off, the sleeves of her white blouse neatly rolled to her elbows. She looked noticeably fatigued in a way I had never witnessed before. "Close the door," she instructed. I complied. The soft click of the latch echoed unnaturally loudly in the silence. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she rose and walked to the window, crossing her arms defensively. The fragmented city lights far below made her appear almost small, a profoundly strange sight, as Maya Hayes was never meant to look small. "The flowers," she said at last, still facing the window and the view. "Do you know who is sending them?" Her directness caught me off guard again. "No," I answered with careful honesty, "and I have not made any effort to find out who it is." She turned to face me then, and the expression in her eyes caused my pulse to quicken alarmingly. "Good," she said, but the inflection she used made me fundamentally question the true meaning of the word. There was a significant, charged pause. Then she continued, "Starting Monday, your primary desk will be relocated immediately outside my office. You will report directly to me for the entire next quarter." This was the promotion. This was the apex opportunity people desperately coveted. So why did the reality feel precisely like the click of a cage door closing shut? "That is very generous," I managed to articulate. "Thank you." Her jaw tightened visibly. "It is not about generosity, Paul. You are highly proficient at your job. You possess the valuable ability to see problems before they are visible to anyone else. I require that capacity nearby." But the clinical way she delivered the assessment made me suspect she required something far more complex entirely. She dismissed me a moment later. I left her office with a heartbeat that throbbed against my ribs. That evening, I packed up my personal effects slowly, acutely aware that Monday would initiate a radically new existence. When I glanced back at Maya's office, She was once again standing by the window, watching me. Our eyes met through the separating glass, and this time, neither of us broke the contact first. Something fundamental had shifted irrevocably between us. I had no name for the dynamic yet, but this much I knew. The flowers were no longer merely flowers. They were a direct, provocative question, and Maya Hayes was evidently furious that someone else was the one asking it. My desk was relocated over the weekend. When I arrived early Monday morning, I found it positioned directly outside Maya's door. It was close enough that I could clearly discern the tenor of her voice through the glass during conference calls. Close enough that she could instantly observe me every single time she looked up from her work. The arrangement felt strategic, deliberate, like the calculated repositioning of a critical piece on a high-stakes board game. I set my bag down and tried to project normality, but normality was permanently gone. I was visible now in a way I had fought successfully to avoid. The flowers continued to arrive. Not every day, but often enough that the office staff gave up the pretense of not noticing. Tuesday brought a single, elegant white rose in a narrow crystal vase. Thursday, a small, vibrant bunch of daisies. Each delivery occurred early, long before the majority of the staff arrived, suggesting the sender knew my precise schedule, that someone was indeed watching. And I was definitely not the only one watching. Maya's attention had become a constant, physical pressure, heavy, impossible to ignore. She insisted I sit in on conference calls where previously I had only been required to furnish notes. She solicited my input directly during high-level strategy sessions. She routinely kept me late, reviewing meticulous details that could easily have waited until the following day. On the surface, this was a massive opportunity. In practice, it felt like something else, a condition I couldn't articulate. One late afternoon, her desk buzzed mine. "Paul, I need you to review these contracts before the 4 o'clock call." I grabbed my notebook and entered her office. She was standing next to her desk, tablet computer in hand. But when I reached the appropriate distance, she didn't immediately surrender the device. Instead, she fixed her gaze on my face, studying me as if attempting to solve a deeply irritating puzzle. "You have been distracted," she stated, not posing a question. "I have not," I responded immediately, maintaining an absolutely steady voice. "My work has not suffered in any capacity." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I did not assert that your work had suffered. I stated that you have been distracted." The air between us grew thick, almost viscous. I had no protocol response for that kind of psychological assessment, so I maintained silence. She finally handed me the tablet, her fingers momentarily brushing mine as she transferred the weight. The contact was infinitesimally brief, yet it sent a sharp, undesirable jolt through me, a reaction I despised myself for acknowledging. 4 o'clock, she reminded me, her voice cold. "Do not be late." That night, I stayed significantly later than necessary, finalizing reports that were not due until the next week. I rationalized it internally as preparation, as proof that I was worthy of this elevated role. But the underlying truth was more difficult to confront. I was actively avoiding going home to an empty, silent apartment where I will just think about her, about the way she looks at me now, about what all of this escalating tension truly means. The city outside my high-rise window had faded into a deep, chilled violet when, around 8 o'clock, Maya emerged from the glass solitude of her office. Most of the floor was now a cavern of dark, reflective silence, the only light coming from the scattered monitors of the few dedicated, or perhaps lonely souls remaining. She stopped at the low wall of my desk area, her movements halting, as if surprised to find life there. "You are still here," she stated, the question soft but carrying an undertone of curiosity. I glanced up, forcing a casual composure. "Just wrapping up," I replied, stacking papers I didn't actually need. She hesitated for a long moment, studying the way I sat hunched over my keyboard. Then, she did something truly unexpected, pulling her elegant, tailored wool jacket, the one she wore to important board meetings, from her shoulder and holding it out toward me. "It is cold outside. Take this." I stared at the jacket, instantly remembering the last time she had done this months ago, a moment I had dismissed as purely professional concern. It was a simple gesture, the kind anyone might make for a subordinate heading out into the night air. But coming from her again, now, after weeks of strained glances and unspoken meaning, it felt like so much more, like she was offering something beyond mere fabric and warmth. "I am okay," I started to say, prepared to politely refuse, but she cut me off sharply. "Take it, Paul." Her voice was firm, suddenly snapping back into the tone of absolute authority she used in high-stakes meetings when she would not accept argument or dissent. I took the jacket. The wool was smooth and heavy, still retaining her warmth. It smelled distinctively of her perfume, something subtle, expensive, and utterly unforgettable. "Thank you," I managed quietly. She offered a brief, tight nod, then turned and walked toward the elevator bank without another word, leaving me sitting there in the echoing quiet, holding the tangible proof of her presence for a long time after she left, wondering what seismic event had just occurred beneath the polished surface of our professional lives. The next morning, the drama resumed, but this time with a witness. Another delivery arrived, catching Maya in the open. I was at the printer down the hall when the florist, a young man looking slightly confused by the silence of the executive floor, walked right up to my desk. Through the glass panels, I saw her. She was leaving her office, heading toward the kitchen, but she stopped dead. I watched her freeze, saw the precise moment her body went rigid, her spine locking into a posture of surprised defense. By the time I returned to my desk, the flowers were sitting there, soft pink roses this time, less fiery than the previous arrangement, yet undeniably beautiful. And Maya was standing beside my desk, closer than necessary. Her face was perfectly calm, an unreadable mask, but her hands were clenched into tight fists at her sides, betraying the severe internal strain. "Someone really likes you," she said. Her voice sounded light, almost amused, the exact pitch of casualness required for the office. But there was a sharp, dangerous edge underneath the pleasant veneer. I did not know what to say to her controlled fury, so I just nodded, feeling awkward and slightly complicit in a scheme I didn't understand. She stared at the delicate pink roses for another charged moment, then walked back into her office and closed the door. Not a slam, that would have been unprofessional, just a firm, final click that echoed the definitive nature of her boundary. For the rest of the day, the phone remained silent. She did not call me in, did not ask for a single report or favor. When I glanced through the glass partition, she was working with ferocious focus, but her jaw was visibly tight, her movements sharp, almost aggressive. By late afternoon, the tension felt suffocating, an oppressive weight that had settled over the entire floor. I could not take the silence anymore. I walked to her door and gave a sharp, deliberate knock. "Come in," she said immediately. Her voice clipped, not even bothering to look up from the documents spread across her desk. I stepped inside and closed the heavy door behind me, sealing us in the polished silence. Did I do something wrong? The question was simple, desperate. The sound of my voice made her stop. She set down her pen with unnatural precision and finally met my eyes, her gaze clear and analytical. "No," she said, her voice measured. "You did not do anything wrong." The silence stretched, heavy and profound, filled only with the silent battle being waged in her eyes. Then she asked the question I had been dreading since the florist arrived. "Do you know who is sending them?" "No," I told her again, maintaining eye contact. "It is still the truth, and I have not tried to find out." Something flickered in her expression. It was too fast to read, possibly relief that I wasn't involved in some secret affair, or perhaps disappointment that the answer wasn't simpler. She leaned back in her high-backed leather chair, a posture of study, scrutinizing me as if trying to decipher something profoundly important. "Sit down, Paul." I took the chair across from her desk, the usual subordinate position, but today it felt like the witness stand. My heart was pounding a steady, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "I built this company by being careful," she began, her eyes tracing the lines of the cityscape outside the window. "By drawing clear lines and never crossing them. That discipline kept me focused. Successful." She paused, picking up the heavy pen and turning it slowly in her fingers. But lately, I have been wondering if I have been too careful. I did not interrupt. I barely dared to breathe. You have been here for over a year, she continued, the statement a simple, undeniable fact. In that time, you have solved problems before I even knew they existed. You have made my life easier without ever asking for anything in return. Not promotion. Not praise. I noticed that. I just chose not to say anything. Her admission hit me harder than I expected. A sudden, sharp blow to the chest. She noticed. All this time, I thought I was professionally invisible, just a reliable extension of her will. But she saw me. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly, the air thick with possibility. She leaned forward again, resting her elbows on the desk, her eyes locked fiercely on mine. Because watching someone else see you, watching the effect that simple acknowledgement has had on this entire office, made me realize what I have been actively avoiding. Before I could fully process the implication of her startling confession, her phone buzzed. A discreet, persistent vibration on the glass surface of the desk. She glanced at the screen, and the fragile, intense moment we were having shattered instantly. "We will talk more later," she said, her tone instantly sliding back into the impenetrable professional mask. "You can go." I stood and walked to the door, my mind reeling. But just before I left, I turned back. She was still watching me, and in her eyes, beneath the hard, polished exterior, I saw something I had never seen there before. Something raw and exposed. Something that looked a lot like fear. I almost missed the email entirely. My inbox was a torrent of mundane meeting requests, budget approvals, and routine administrative sludge when I saw the message flash from building reception. A visitor was asking for me. The name? Thomas Bennett. The name hit me like a splash of cold water. I sat back in my chair, staring blankly at the screen while my heart rate tripled. A rapid, panicked drumbeat. Thomas Bennett was not a client. He was not a relative or an old college friend. He was a stranger I had met exactly 6 months ago in the concrete depths of the parking garage on a Tuesday afternoon when most people were already heading home to their families. I remembered that day with photographic clarity. I had stayed late to finish a critical, late-breaking presentation and was walking to my car, keys already out, when I heard someone crying. Not loud, not dramatic or attention-seeking, just quiet, ragged sobs that sounded like they were being painfully pulled from somewhere deep inside the man's core. Thomas was sitting hunched over on the cold, oil-stained concrete floor next to his expensive black sedan. His back against the tire, his face buried completely in his hands. His leather briefcase was tipped over beside him, papers scattered across the grimy ground like discarded secrets. I stopped. Most people would have kept walking, assuming it was a private moment or simply not their problem. I almost did, but something about the absolute, complete way he looked so utterly lost made me pause, made me take a step toward him. I walked over and simply asked if he was okay. He looked up at me then, his eyes terribly red and raw, and told me his wife had just served him divorce papers while he was in a meeting. He had a meeting with a high-powered lawyer upstairs in 20 minutes, and he kept repeating the desperate phrase. He could not breathe. I sat down next to him on that freezing garage floor. I did not try to offer platitudes or legal advice. I did not try to fix it. I just sat there shoulder to shoulder while he talked, while he cried, while he slowly, agonizingly, tried to pull himself back together enough to face a law office. When he finally calmed down, his voice raspy, I helped him gather his scattered papers. I walked him to the elevator and rode up with him to the law office 2 floors above ours, making sure he got through the door. Before he went in, he shook my hand, his grip surprisingly strong, and said, "Thank you." I told him it was nothing, went back to my car, and never mentioned the incident to anyone, not even to myself after that day. And now he was here. I typed back a quick reply to reception. Yes, I was expecting him. I stood up from my desk and smoothed down my shirt, suddenly nervous and self-conscious without understanding why the sight of this grateful stranger should affect me so deeply. When I reached the brightly lit lobby, Thomas was waiting near the front doors. He looked profoundly different, healthier, more composed, perhaps a little thinner. His face had color, his eyes were clear, And he smiled when he saw me, the kind of open, genuine smile that reaches all the way up to crinkle the corners of the eyes. "Paul," he said, stepping forward and holding out his hand. "I was not sure you would remember me." "Of course, I remember," I told him, shaking his hand, the tension draining slightly from my shoulders. We shook hands, and I led him away from the bustling reception desk to a quiet corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows where we could talk without being overheard by staff or passing executives. Thomas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, heavy piece of cardstock. One of the cards, the exact same kind that had been arriving with the flowers for weeks. My stomach dropped with a nauseating finality. The truth was suddenly right here. "I was afraid you might think I crossed a line," he said, his voice gentle and entirely devoid of any romantic suggestion. "But that day in the garage you treated me like I mattered, like I was not just some broken man dissolving in public view. You sat with me when you did not have to, when everyone else would have walked past." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "The flowers," I said, needing him to confirm the obvious. He nodded, meeting my gaze directly. "I wanted you to know that what you did stayed with me. My therapist told me I should find concrete ways to express gratitude for the people who showed me kindness during the hardest time of my life. You were at the top of that list." There was no romance in his voice, no hidden meaning, no veiled agenda. Just pure, honest, powerful gratitude. I felt something massive release in my chest, warm and grounding, like a long-held breath finally escaping. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Thomas replied simply. "Because you showed me kindness when I felt invisible. I wanted to return that feeling." We talked for a few more minutes. He told me he was doing much better, that therapy was working, and that he had started rebuilding his life piece by piece. When he finally left, he shook my hand again, a firm, appreciative grip, and told me to take care of myself. I watched him walk out of the building and disappear onto the street, feeling lighter and clearer than I had in weeks. I turned to head back upstairs and froze. Maya was standing near the elevators, perfectly still. She was not looking at her phone. She was not talking to a security guard or an assistant. She was just standing there, watching me. Our eyes met across the expanse of the marble lobby. I could not read her expression now. It was not anger as it had been yesterday. It was not disappointment. It was something softer, something incredibly vulnerable, something I had genuinely never seen on her face before. She walked toward me slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor, each sound precise and deliberate. When she reached me, she stopped just close enough that I could smell the familiar, expensive hint of her perfume. "I know who sent the flowers," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost careful, as if testing the temperature of the water. I nodded. He needed help that day. That is all it was. She looked at me for a long moment. Her jaw was tight again, like she was holding back a flood of words that desperately wanted to come out. "Why did you never mention it?" she finally asked. I shrugged, the gesture honest. There was nothing to mention. I did not do it to be noticed. Something profound flickered in her eyes. "That," she said slowly, "is what makes this so difficult." I frowned, confused by her logic. "What do you mean?" She looked away toward the vast windows, toward the intricate grid of the city stretching out beyond the glass. For a few seconds, she did not say anything, seemingly gathering the immense weight of her thoughts. Then she spoke again, her voice lower, heavier. "I have been careful my whole life, Paul. Too careful. I built this company by keeping distance between myself and everyone else. I thought that was strength. I thought that was how you stayed in control." She paused, the confession hanging in the silent air. "But watching someone else see you, really see you effortlessly the way Thomas did, made me realize something critical. I have been standing close enough to matter for months, and I never stepped forward. My heart was beating so hard I thought the sound might carry across the lobby." Maya turned back to me. Her expression was completely open in a way I had never seen before, exposed, vulnerable. "For once," she said, "I am going to stop pretending that I do not see you." The words hung in the air between us, crystalline and definitive. I did not know what to say. I did not know if I should say anything at all. realizing the immense cost of that admission to a woman obsessed with control. She waited, watching me, and I finally understood. This was not just an admission of fact. It was an invitation to a future that existed outside the carefully defined lines of our professional relationship. She asked me to come to her office, but not in front of everyone, not with a pre-scheduled professionalism. She leaned in close, her breath ghosting my ear, and said it quietly, like a secret meant only for me. When I followed her inside and she closed the door, the ambient city noise faded completely away. We were alone in a way that felt fundamentally different from every other time I had been in this powerful room. Maya did not retreat behind her imposing desk. Instead, she stood by the window, her arms crossed, staring out at the dizzying expanse of buildings that stretched toward the water. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice strained. "And this time it will not be as your boss." My throat went tight, a knot of anticipation. I waited. She turned to face me fully, her gaze unwavering. "Do you want to be seen by me in a way that cannot be undone?" The question landed heavy, demanding absolute clarity. I took a deep, steadying breath. "Maya," I said, using her first name for the first time without flinching or self-correction. "You have seen me for weeks now, just not in the way that matters." She closed her eyes briefly, a fleeting flicker of pain, as if the words hurt her. "I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "That is what I am trying to fix." I looked at her, really looked at her. Not as the woman who signed my paychecks or decided my career trajectory, but as someone standing in front of me without the usual armor. "I need to be clear," I told her, my voice calm but firm, staking my ground. "I will not be chosen because you are afraid of losing me, and I will not stay where I become invisible again the moment the attention fades." She nodded once, sharp and decisive. "That is fair." A difficult silence filled the space, but now it felt honest, a foundational silence. "There is one more thing," I added, pushing the point further. "If this crosses a line, any line, I walk away completely. No special treatment, no quiet expectations, no looking the other way from the hierarchy." Maya met my eyes without hesitation. "I understand." Then she said something I was profoundly not expecting. "I am stepping down from direct oversight. Human resources will restructure the reporting lines immediately. If you choose to stay, it will be on equal ground. If you choose to leave, I will support that decision without question." I stared at her, stunned by the magnitude of the sacrifice. "You would give up control?" I asked slowly, the realization dawning, before even asking me for anything in return. "Yes," she said, her voice utterly devoid of artifice. "Because if I ask you to stay, I want it to be because you choose me, not because you feel trapped by obligation or employment." Something deep in my chest loosened completely. "That is the first time," I said quietly, "you have truly seen me." She exhaled like she had been holding her breath for a very long time, maybe for years. The tension that had been wrapped around both of us like a constricting wire for weeks started to fall away. "I should have done this sooner," she admitted. "I know, but I was afraid. Afraid of what people would say. Afraid of losing control. Afraid that if I let myself feel something real, it would cost me everything I built." I understood that fear profoundly. I had spent my whole adult life being afraid too. Afraid of losing my job. Afraid of not being able to pay my father's bills. Afraid that if I asked for more, I would end up with nothing. We stood there in her massive office as the late afternoon light slanted through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the space between us. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Finally, she spoke again, her vulnerability still present but tempered with determination. "I do not know how to do this," she admitted, a frank confession of uncertainty. "How to be someone's boss and also," she hesitated just a fraction, "also something else entirely." "We will figure it out," I said, the statement sounding less like a promise and more like a collaboration. "One step at a time." She smiled then, a real smile. Not the polished, practiced one she wore in meetings, but a genuine curve that softened the angles of her face and made her look unexpectedly younger. That evening, I stayed late, deliberately slowing down to finish up some detailed reports. Most of the office had already emptied out, and the floors were quiet except for the low, continuous hum of the air system and the distant, muffled sound of traffic flowing far below. When I finally shut down my computer and stood to leave, I saw something waiting on my desk, a single white rose, lying across my keyboard. It had not been delivered by a florist, nor left by a stranger. Maya was standing a few steps away near the elevator bank, still there, watching me notice it. "I did not want to send it," she said simply, her eyes meeting mine across the twilight shadows of the office floor. "I wanted to give it." I picked up the rose, turning it carefully in my fingers, admiring the fragile, unfurled petals. For the first time, I said, "It feels different." "Good," she replied, her voice low, "because this time there is nothing hidden behind it." I looked at her, the woman who had walked past me every single morning for over a year without a genuine glance. "Tomorrow," I said, "we start honest." "Tomorrow," she agreed. The next day arrived with a strange, pervasive sense of calm, like the world had settled back into its proper rotation. I walked into the office and superficially, everything looked exactly the same. My desk was in the same spot. The coffee machine hummed reliably in the break room. People typed diligently at their computers and talked on their phones just like always. But something fundamental had shifted beneath the professional surface. Human Resources sent out a brief email later that morning. Reporting structures had been quietly adjusted. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would raise widespread questions, just a quiet, necessary reorganization that meant I no longer reported directly to Maya. For everyone else, it was just another administrative update. For us, it was freedom, a commitment formalized in policy. Maya did not walk past my desk that morning, lost in her thoughts. She stopped. "Good morning, Paul," she said, her voice clear. I looked up and met her eyes, without fear or deference. Good morning. Just two people who had finally stopped pretending about the most important thing. Over the next few weeks, we found our new rhythm with deliberate care. At work, we maintained strict professionalism. Meetings stayed focused. Decisions stayed fair and objective. When I spoke up, my ideas were heard not because of who I was to her outside the office, but because they were good ideas. When I disagreed, my viewpoint was considered respectfully. No special treatment, no quiet favors, just absolute, mutual respect for the boundary we had both drawn. Outside the office, we met by choice. Simple dinners at quiet, unassuming restaurants where we could talk without being watched or speculated about. Walks along the waterfront after long days, the cold air biting at our faces while we spoke about things that had nothing to do with deadlines or deliverables. She told me about the early, terrifying years of her company, the nights she stayed up wondering if she would lose everything to a miscalculation. I told her about my father, about sitting beside his hospital bed and promising myself I would never let him down or allow myself to fail. We learned each other slowly, carefully, without rushing the process. One evening, as we stood near the edge of the water, watching the city lights reflect brokenly off the dark surface, Maya stopped walking entirely. "There is something I want to say," she told me. "For most of my life," she said, "I believed that control was protection, that if I never reached first, I could never lose. But watching you be seen by someone else, that showed me what I was really risking. Not failure, Paul. Loneliness." I looked at her, understanding the profound weight of that final realization. "Being seen is not a reward," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It is a responsibility." She smiled at that, a slow, genuine recognition of the truth. The next morning, when I arrived at work, there was a small, heavy crystal vase on the corner of my desk, catching the morning light. Inside it sat a single white rose, not delivered by a florist, not accompanied by a cryptic card or message, just quiet, certain intentionality. Maya stood near the entrance to her office watching me notice it. She did not speak. She did not need to. I picked up the rose, inhaling the faint, sweet scent, and met her gaze across the expanse of the floor. "This," I said softly, "is different." "I know," she replied, her voice confident. "That is why I waited." Around us, the office moved on. People walked past with coffee cups and file folders. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked rapidly. No one noticed that something immense had finished its long, arduous journey. I placed the rose beside my keyboard and sat down. Not as someone invisible, not as someone claimed through possessiveness, but as someone chosen deliberately and with respect. And Maya returned to her office knowing that for the first time in her life, she had not won by holding back her power. She had won by finally showing up completely. Sometimes love does not arrive with speeches or grand, dramatic moments. Sometimes it arrives the moment someone finally says, without fear or calculation, "I see you," and truly, honestly means it.